Hello. Just wanted to do a quick little recording session here while I work on some new toys and tools that I've been exploring the past couple of months. Um, Namely, how I can get full color icon fonts into regular text using GREP styles and this new plugin that I've been messing around with for a little bit called FontSelf Maker. It's currently, as of recording, version 3.5.1. So if you have a older or later version, there might be some differences, but generally speaking, it's going to be pretty similar to whatever you have. Once you've downloaded it and installed it into Illustrator, you can kind of take it from here. To bring it up, you just have to go to Windows, Extensions, and FontSelf Maker. And I've got a file here prepared that is usually the first starting steps of making the font in FontSelf Maker. The gist is that you have to have the full alphabet and numbers set up so that you can make ligatures out of those individual letters. So if you've seen my previous videos, you know that what's going to end up happening is that anytime someone types in all caps coin in this case, or star or blue star, what have you, that's going to be replaced with an icon inline. And my previous ways of doing this had required that those icons be single color, kind of like this lightning bolt you see here. This is a single color, and sometimes, if you're lucky and this shape is simple enough, you could also do a stroke that will be a different color. But aside from that, the options were fairly limited. You couldn't really do like multiple colors within a single icon, like making that outline like just a different color, you know. But now with FontSelf Maker, I have the possibility of doing some interesting stuff. I can turn this into an icon font. I can turn this blue star into an icon font. And this is going to be the stretch. I'm going to save that for last. But gradients are the tricky thing in FontSelf Maker, and I haven't had like 100% success rate with it yet. But we'll see how that works out. So to start off, I have these full alphabets all typed up. And I have very carefully set up my artboard to be basically on the same scale as this text. And I use that one artboard to size all of my icons to make sure that when I bring those icons into FontSelf Maker, that they are scaled relative to the size of regular text. So if your icon is much, much bigger than the text that you plugged in as your baseline, then it's going to be bigger. And you have to do some fine tuning in the options and stuff to make it fit. I don't want to do all that. So from the jump, I just start making my icons basically the same scale as my text. So first off, I'm gonna create outlines that turns all of this text into individual objects. I'm ungrouping those, and now you see I'm highlighting over here the A to Z uppercase alphabet from left to right. I click that while I have the full alphabet selected, and that is going to import all these letters into the font that I'm working on. Mind you, this isn't a font yet, technically. I'd have to save it out as a font file in order to do that. But I do the same for the lowercase. Now you can see there's A, B, and so on. And I have the numbers from 0 through 9. Cool. So now I have that full alphabet and all the numbers brought in. I'm not going to be using any of these individual letter forms on their own. They're just there as placeholders so that I can take the next step and make ligatures, which are just a sequence of characters that go together and will be replaced with an individual glyph. You could do all these steps also by using the batch action, but that includes like accents and a bunch of other diacritic marks that I don't really ever really need to mess with. It's just fine for me to have the basic alphabet set up. And honestly, I don't even need the lowercase alphabet, but sometimes it's just there to be on the safe side in case the font that I plan to use would mix up lowercase and uppercase alphabets. Okay, so now I can get rid of all this. And my plan is to just take this list of keywords and use it as a reminder while I'm working. Use it as a checklist, basically. And let's move the coin to the bottom, since that's going to be the trickiest one. That's the one with the dragon and the gradients and stuff. Let's start simple. I like to make different layers in the same artboard for each icon so that I don't have to make multiple artboards and make sure they're all scaled correctly and tracking where they are in the document. So I'm just going to call this layer star. And thankfully, I already have an Illustrator file set up for this icon, which I've used previously. What you don't see back here in the back is that I have some vector objects that are these like starburst things. So I have these like white starbursts there, and I want to make sure I include those in the icon. So I'm just grouping all of this, copying it, going back to my thing, and now I can scale this. Oop, a little bit too big. Okay, that's just about right. Now, while I have this whole group selected, and it's important that it is a group here. You can see that here. Now FontSelf will interpret that as a single glyph, and I can just type star, not stare, and click on Create Ligature. And I'm going to be asked if I want to make a standard ligature or a discretionary ligature, which is sort of a distinction that I don't really need to worry about myself. I'll just make it a standard ligature. The gist of it is that standard means that it's always going to come up. Discretionary means that you'd have to like manually in your font settings turn it on as an option. And you can see it's actually in alphabetical order whenever you insert a new icon into your font. So in this case, star comes right after S. And it's as simple as that, really. I'll go through this process with all of the stuff that I need to do. So let's make a new layer, call that blue star. Grouping that, copying it. Making sure I have the right layer selected. Scaling that to basically the same size as the yellow version. Oops. Yeah, good enough. All right, so have that group selected. Again, making sure that it is a group here in your layers palette. And FontSelf Maker. Got this. Let's call this blue star. Create ligature. Make it a standard ligature. And there it is. I've got a couple small icons that I'm using in the game as well, like this infinity symbol, which is relatively simple. It's just black with a white stroke, but sometimes strokes are unreliable. Sometimes they'll cause big spikes around sharp corners, and I wanted to have a little bit more manual control over how the stroke worked around the infinity symbol. Oop, a little bit too big. A little bit smaller. Okay, cool. Let's call that, what is the word for that? Just infinity? Okay. So again, making sure that's a group. Yep, it's a group. Call that infinity. Sweet. Next. Hack. Where did I put that? There we go. Turn off that layer. This chunker is a little bit too big, so I'm going to scale down a bit. It's just about right. Okay, so call that there's the hack symbol. Now these are the getting to the more interesting things here. So I'm going to need some icons for each die phase for a set of D6s. And I have the faces set up already, thankfully. But the markup that we're using is using these curly brackets, which is a little bit different than I usually set up my die faces in an icon font. I typically advise using much simpler iconography, or sorry, much simpler characters, because it is very likely that you'll accidentally do the wrong bracket, or you'll do the wrong closing bracket or whatever. Anyone who's done much coding knows that these errors can pop up occasionally. So the more foolproof you can make your system, the better. So in this case, I would have normally recommended saying capital D1, capital D2, capital D3, and so on. But this is the system that we're using as our markup, and it's not a big deal. It'll also require me to do some additional preparation when I set up the GREP styles in InDesign to make sure that I don't make those brackets a live character, which can be a problem. Alrighty. So the funky thing I've got set up here on these die faces is that I only have the pips. I don't have the actual square. So I'm gonna have to just be very mindful of that. You know what? I should scale these down just a little bit here so that they're all relatively scaled. Oh, and I should group these as well while I'm at it. That's grouped. That's grouped. Okay, cool. All right, so coming back here. All right. Two. Goodness. Oh, still too big. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and bring this whole thing over. How big does this need to be? Okay, not that small. About maybe a little shy. Yeah, think that'll be good. Okie dokie. Come on now. Okay, well, I'm selecting a bunch of random stuff here. Chill. Okay. So there's the one. Nope. I'm making sure these are centered. Alrighty. Okay, so I've got the pips in. Now I have to make a rectangle, square, dealy that is centered. And ideally has rounded corners, like so. Making that white. Oops. And that stroke doesn't need to be so big. Is that 1 point? Yep, sure is. Let's call that half point. Ooh, a little bit too small. I think that's adequate. So now we gotta, nope, not the same layer. It's a little bit easier to see for you. I tend to skip ahead and just like almost look only at the layer palette when I'm working on stuff like this. Sometimes to my detriment. I need to see the entire canvas. All right, cool. So I've got first die, second die, fourth die, fifth die, sixth die. All right, so the next step is to make these groups like before and call this what? Oh, you know what? I don't think I have. Yeah, I don't think it's going to allow me to make this ligature because yes, I don't have those symbols. Okay, let's see. First I have to make those symbols. Curly brackets, that is. Make those both outlines. Create the glyph. Create that glyph. Cool. Easy peasy. Now I can make this ligature. Cool. And I'm gonna do this again for these dice, making sure that I have the whole thing grouped, not just the pips. Bigger for you so you can see what I'm doing. That's the 3. Yes, standard. You see a lot of this is fairly simple, at times sometimes a little bit tedious, but the results are nice, and for a little bit of work you do up front, saves you a lot of time. Oop, make sure I have that grouped. I almost skipped the step there. And you don't have to do all this necessarily if you feel like you have an easier time dropping linked files. That's certainly entirely reasonable if you're going to make icons that are going to go inside text in a rulebook. The reason I'm going through this trouble a lot of times is because some folks use text readers. If you're vision impaired, or if you just you prefer to read text that way, you can have your reader of choice read aloud the text. And if it comes across a linked image that has no text counterpart to it, it just skips over. So anytime a die face is mentioned, it would just skip. At least in this case, there is a text component to it in the raw text that you can follow along with, because the text reader will actually say a thing. It'll say 1 or 2 or 3, or in this case, it'll say star when it comes across a star icon. It wouldn't do that if I had just linked to an Illustrator file that had that star image in it. I believe it would just skip it over. Or maybe there's an error, which is even worse. I would hate to have that happen to me. All right, now this coin. The reason I've saved this for last is because gradients can be a little bit problematic in FontSelf. This is the one thing I've had the most issues with. So let's see how it handles it. A lot of times when I bring in something with transparencies or gradients in it into FontSelf, they get simplified quite a bit. Ooh, okay, nope. Select the thing, please. Ooh, boy, that's big. So gradients get simplified into like simple rectangles, for example, and it's not exactly what I'm looking for, you know. So first step, scale this down. Oop, no, not that much. Come on. Why is this not centered? There, okay. Let's call this 5.75. That's good enough. Maybe 8. Man, don't get too much of a perfectionist. This may not even work. All right, so the ligature will be coin. Let's see what happens. Okay, it looks like the gradients came through okay, actually. Yeah, this looks all right. Hey, I was worried about nothing. Sweet. You can preview any individual glyph like this just by double-clicking it in FontSelf Maker, which is very nice. All right, so now that I have my pinball icon font, this is all for the pinball game, by the way. So just to review the layer structure here, I have my individual icons as separate layers in Illustrator. Cool. And I have corresponding ligatures in the font file. Now I actually have to save it. So I'm going to name this Pinball Icon Font V1. I'm not going to fill in all the rest of this because chances are there's going to be some awkward things that I need to revise. So this is just going to be the first version. I'm probably going to have another version or two after this. And I will save this in my project folder. bunch of stuff here that will warn you because some older versions of different Adobe products or browsers or things like that won't recognize some color fonts. So it's just warning you about all that. All right, so now we have to go back here. And this is the rulebook. I've got the background and a bunch of other graphics removed here just to keep things simple as you're following along. So just to review, this paragraph style is called Inline Header. I've got it set up so that everything before a colon is bolded, but it's based on the body paragraph style. So any change I make to the body paragraph style will precipitate to the rest. And I don't know why body is based on page numbering. I'm gonna remove that link because I don't want, if I have to change the page numbering style, I don't want that to affect the body copy. Fix a little error typo there. Okay, so let's see if you remember how GREP styles work. The gist is that we are gonna have to install a font that has the ligatures set up. In this case, I've saved it here. Now I'm working in a Mac, so installing fonts is fairly easy. I can just double click a font and hit install, and FontBook installs it. Boy, oh boy, I have a lot of fonts installed, but you know, hey, what are you gonna do? Cool, so that font is installed. Back in the paragraph styles in InDesign, I'm gonna put in a couple of the glyphs that I need. So star, and then this vertical line means or. So star or blue star. Let's see. There's a few others that I can try out here. Let's say coin hack. Let's do those for now, and then we'll deal with the dice font later. Now I'm going to apply a character style that I have not made yet. So let's make that. Call it pinball icons. And it's not based on any other previous style. The only thing it's doing is bringing in the pinball font. And here you can see it. Where is it? Did I miss it? There it is. Pinball icon font. Version 1. And that's the only change I'm making to it. I'm not applying any other character styles or anything to it, other characteristics. And you can see right away, it works. Boom. Anytime the characters in all caps STAR appear together, it will be a ligature. So you can convert that back to plain text if you need to in InDesign, but I want this to be an inline icon. So the next step is dealing with these die faces. Going back to the body paragraph style, let's test out something real quick. I don't know all of the grep commands, mind you. Like there's too many to really keep track of. But I believe curly brackets are a live command character in grep. So curly means a thing when you tell it to grep, and so you'd have to tell it, please literally use curly brackets when I'm typing out this text, not the command that pertains to curly brackets. So what's going to happen, I believe, yeah, it actually breaks the whole thing. You can see that the star has changed back into plain text because of the curly brackets here. So all you have to do is add these slashes before every live character so that grep knows that these are literally the characters you wanted to put into the text. And oh boy. looks like there's some kind of problem. What is the issue? Our numbers. Well, I'm going to save that for now. And let's do a more manual test here before I go straight into GREP. Let's actually select this text. Hell, let's select all this text and apply that pinball font manually. Okay, so that works. I might have these slashes incorrect. Like I said, you're following along as I do this. It's this kind of trial and error that I do a lot. I think it's the other slash. I think that's what it was. No? There it is. Yes, it was the, sorry, I used the wrong slash. That's all it was. Whew. I know what I'm doing. So now it's just a matter of doing this 5 more times, 4, and replacing the number 4, 5, and 6. Oh, what did I mess up this time? Ah, I had 2 bars there. A lot of like very fine little details that I mess around with here. All right, so this rulebook is still very rough, but I'm gonna browse through it real quick to just make sure that some things are working correctly. I'm getting an error here because this paragraph style is calling for bold, and there's no bold version of the pinball icon font. But so far, yep, the coin icon showed up correctly. Yep, it's working. Let's see. Oh. Let's convert that. Cool. Man. I'm going to run a search for whole word hack and case sensitive and replace it with hack in this document. Okay. It's probably good to show back. All right. And to resolve these errors, I'm just going to go to the type and go to find font and track down these errors. I'm not going to redefine the style, I'm just going to individually do these. Change all those bold condensed versions of the font that don't exist, and that's why there's these errors. I'm going to change all to regular. Cool. And now that resolved all those errors. Right on. So, there you go. Easy peasy, nice and squeezy. You got yourself some cool inline icons. Man, love it. It's like magic every single time. Never get tired of it. Hope that's useful for you. Hope you learned a thing or two. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right, see you. Bye.